everybody, welcome back to the Overwater Player to Player series. Today's interview is with Ian King. You might recognise Ian from Scott's Bass Lessons, but he's also the bass player on Hamilton in the West End, and he's played with other artists like Hugh Jackman and Take That, just to name two. This is a really lovely chat. I hope it's going to inspire a lot of you. We're talking about what it takes to play in the West End, what Ian's up to with Scott's Bass Lessons, and also setting up his own teaching platform. Enjoy, and we'll see you soon. I'll jump in straight away then, mate. You've just been teaching for SBL this morning. That seems to have kind of ramped up for you in the last kind of 6 months, 12 months or so. Can you tell us about the courses you're teaching there, how you're involved with Scott these days?
Okay, cool. Yeah, well, I sort of got mainly involved with SBL back in the pandemic. So all the theatres had shut, the whole music industry seemed to just grind to a halt. So, you know, like all the other musicians, it's like blind panic. But I was lucky enough to be introduced actually through Chris May from Overwater. And he introduced me to Scott, who was looking for some people to make courses for the site. So I was lucky enough to be asked to do this. He was coming into these things called learning pathways. So he wanted to create lots of courses where if someone's into a specific style, whether it be a style of music or maybe a technique that they're really into, they can just do like a bunch of courses, you know, all sequential, just kind of a load of courses back to back that really concentrate on that thing. So he was, he asked me to do soul and R&B, which is, right up my street. So I found that really fun to do. And in the pandemic, suddenly I was creating these little backing tracks for people to play along, creating little songs and getting friends to record on them and stuff. So it was a really fun thing to do. And then I'd go up and film it up in Leeds where they're based. And then after that, maybe a year or so later, I did the funk pathway as well. So a load of funk tracks. Soul and R&B is a little bit more to do with vocabulary and that sort of thing, that sort of styles, the subgenres of soul and R&B, whereas the funk stuff's more based on kind of rhythms and syncopation and all that kind of thing. So they kind of work quite well. But separate to that, I did quite a lot of coaching for the accelerator courses that he puts out. So he would put out a jazz accelerator, fretboard accelerator. I'd sort of group coach bass players through these courses. But then sort of fast forwarding to today in this kind of time now, he's now added a new level of subscription, which is called Live Class. And essentially it's people can subscribe to, I think they're doing about 16 live classes each week across a bunch of different tutors. And I do on a Monday, I do the funk class. And on a Tuesday, I do this thing called Listening Club, which is all kind of about how do we learn songs? How can we recognize what the harmony is and this sort of thing, help people kind of learn songs quicker. But it's quite fun because it's each week just delve into some tunes, do some transcriptions and just get my head into it and meet a load of bass players. And it's quite a fun process, really. Yeah, it's a bit of a change from my day job at playing at Hamilton in the evenings. So it's, it's quite nice.
Do you talk about things like the skills you would need in the West End and stuff like that with any of the SBL students? Or is that maybe that's a course yet to come?
Possibly, yeah. That's a good question. I mean, can't help but go with what your mindset is. I mean, it must be the same with you when you teach people. You will come with a certain set of thoughts and ideas, and mine are always to try and play the basics well. Most of my career has been playing grade 4 pieces very well. It's kind of like play something that's. Do you know what I'm saying? It's like play something quite straightforward, but make sure it sits really nicely with the drums. Have a good tone, have a good feel, good note placement. So all these basics are actually what's most important in the professional world. Conversely to what you would see on Instagram, where it's all a bit, everyone giving it the tapping and the pyrotechnics. In our sort of professional world, it's more about getting the basics right. So I can't help but people, sort of ram that down people's throats in the lessons because it's the most important thing.
Whilst we're talking about SBL, it's worth mentioning that members of Scott's Bass Lessons can also access a discount on Overwater Basses, which is very handy. You mentioned, Chris, when you were talking about how you got to know Scott, but where did that journey with Overwater begin? And can you tell us about the Overwater basses you're actually using day to day? I'm
trying to think when I first met them, but I think it's like a lot of bass players, a lot of Overwater basses sort of turn up in West End pits, because they're just... they're a real go-to instrument because not only do they sound great and look good, but one of the things they really nail is the hum-free, noise-free, well-grounded instruments, which sounds really boring, but it's an important factor of when you're playing in studios and theatres, which is there's just cabling everywhere and little monitor screens in front of you. There's just so much stuff that can create interference or hum. Overwater are well known for you can just take them anywhere and they're just nice and quiet. So I forget who it was that introduced me to them. But I bought one of their basses maybe 15 plus years ago or something like that. I've always gone more for the kind of the 5-string jazz type basses, just because of the style of work I do. It's a lot of reading, and when people are writing music, they don't care about the range of a bass guitar. There's first note will be an E flat, a low E flat. So you need a 5 for a lot of the sort of work we do. So I met them back in the day, and it's just been a really nice relationship, because it's that kind of thing of a tried and tested instrument, but also with that custom side of it as well. You can kind of choose a few things that you want in the instrument. You've got this great thing of you're going to like a jazz bass, but this is going to be well chosen woods that work well together without dead spots. And then just the electronic side of things work well. So I've had a few of their basses and done that classic faff around, sell one, regret it, buy another one, that kind of thing. So I've had a few, 2 or 3 5-string jazz basses, a 5-string fretless hybrid one. And at the moment I've got two kind of on a variation a bit like this one. So this is a kind of a 5-string jazz, pretty straightforward really. I go for kind of quite a bright sound. So this is like an ash body with a little bit of flame maple on the front, and then like maple neck, maple boards. It's like quite a bright sounding instrument. I've got Bartolini B-axis pickups, which are quite bright. Everything's bright. And then I like the ability to have a kind of bright instrument that I can dull down if I want, rather than the other way around, having a dull instrument that I'm trying to crank treble out of all the time. So if you want to do the Marcus thing, it's there in spades, and then you've got the old passive tone, which is fantastic for just kind of calming yourself, So I've got this one, which is in this lovely color, kind of an amber thing in a satin finish, and then a black version of that basically as well, which I have in the pit, which I had first. And the only difference with this one is it's a 34.5-inch scale. So the black one's 35, so it's got that real killer B string, but it's just they're a bit big, aren't they? And the top strings start to feel a bit tight. So I went for 34.5. It's all very, very geeky and very, specific, but I think it I nailed it with the 34.5 thing. And it's another uni preamp. And then, so that's my main. And then I've got one of their sort of standard 4-string jazz basses, which is just their own pickups, and a John East, a slightly simpler John East preamp, and again loads of maple.
This is
and
the
ash.
one we've seen you playing on your Scots.
Yes,
courses,
that's
I
it.
think, isn't it?
Overwater are kind enough to give me this one to use in the lessons and stuff. So, and again, very quiet pickups. You can go into studios, and I've got a light here now, a screen, and I can, whenever I do lessons, it's all nice and quiet, and you can go into studios, anything you like really. So I think you've got probably...
Is that one Bartolini's as well, or is that the Overwater pickups in that one?
Yeah, this is Overwater's own ones, actually. I think it might be like the second version of their own. And I think what they've done here is they're essentially 2 single coil pickups, but with an extra single coil, like a dummy coil underneath each one. So it's kind of like 2 single coils, but only one of them is actually going to the output. So you get the sound of a single coil instrument, but with the beautiful thing of a hum cancelling coil underneath, just getting rid of all that noise. So that's a very cool thing, because I've tried all the different hum cancellers, and the nearest thing to the single coil sound I've found up to now has been the side by side ones. But with a 5-string, you've got 3 strings and 2, and it's quite hard to get them 100% right, in terms of equal output, but sometimes I've tried stacked hum cancellers before, literally just 2, one on top of the other, and it's something goes wrong with the mid-range. It goes all kind of thick, and I don't know what you feel about that, but I find the mid-range sounds a bit thick for me. So this is really nice, because it still sounds like a J, but it's got its hum cancelled, So it's a big thing, isn't it? The old noise. But there you go.
The next thing I wanted to get into was, we've been doing a feature called War Stories, which is a time on a gig where you were really getting roasted by the MD, your gear went wrong, you were really kind of up against it. Can you tell us this? We've all been there. I've been open about a couple of mine in a few of these, but can you tell us about a time something like that's happened, and how did you get through it? Because I'm sure you did in the end and came out okay.
Yes, it's a difficult question. I mean, I don't know if there are many interesting ones. I had you had the classic battery go on a bass, which is annoying. I think I was on a stage at like Wembley Arena doing, I think it was like, I did these tours, Doctor Who live, and or there was another one I did, Jesus Christ Superstar. I forget, it was one of those two, and did the classic, battery go. But you kind of need, with these overwater basses, you've got that very quick, the little door at the back. You could just whip it out and do. But I had to do that on stage, which was kind of annoying. Luckily, you got the passive thing, which helped, But I think
Yeah.
in terms of war stories, it's more like comedy stories for me. Like I remember there was one I thought of when you asked me about this. I thought one story that's worth mentioning is when I was in the pit once. Um, I think it was Hairspray I did absolutely years ago, and we had quite a quirky cover MD in that day. So MD meaning musical director. So the person sat sort of slightly higher on a rostrum, and then the pit's a bit lower, and the MD's just here with his head poking out of the pit, so he could see what's going on the stage. And it was kind of a quirky guy who was always bouncing around on his chair, always really, really enthusiastic about everything. And we were playing a song, and I seem to remember he was on the wrong patch for the whole song. So we're already laughing because he's scrolling through these sounds. He's trying to play this song. He's on like a church organ, and then it's like, oh god, no panpipes, and then it's like, tin whistle, whatever. And we're already laughing because he just can't get it. But during the whole thing, he's just bouncing around on his chair the whole time and pointing at people, being kind of really exuberant. And he was on one of those sort of crossed stools. He's sitting on this stool. And behind him, if you imagine, you've got almost like these little mini saloon doors that they've created that sort of keep him separate from the audience. And he's bouncing around, he's laughing because he's on the wrong patch and doing all this. Suddenly his stool completely collapsed from under him. It was almost like the headphones stayed where they were in midair. He completely fell backwards and disappeared through these saloon doors, which immediately slammed shut like this. So I think in that sort of instance, the whole band had to almost stop playing because we were just crying with laughter so much because this guy's just bouncing around playing the wrong sound for the whole song. And then suddenly just immediately disappeared, went through the back door, the little doors shut, and he was gone. And then I think he just sort of found his way back up, got himself up, got his headphones on. His stool had gone, so he had to play the rest of the song kind of crouching down, trying to look into the camera because we're all watching him on the screen. And I think so. It's not quite a war story, but they're the sort of things that sometimes that go wrong, and you can't really continue playing. I mean, there's been other ones where, like, I think I heard about another bass player did a similar thing where his stool completely collapsed under him. He went down, and then his cable got connected into all his pedals, and he couldn't get up, so he had to play the rest of the song sat on the floor. So it's just things like that I think where we all kind of, you get to a point where you just can't play anymore because you're just crying with laughter. So luckily those things happen quite a lot to break up the day in day out thing of playing shows. You need some stuff to go wrong every so often. But yeah,
we can embellish that
yeah.
into a kind of a legend of the West End, where if you're playing the wrong sound or you're messing up, a trapdoor will open up underneath you and you'll disappear forever underneath the stage.
Yeah, well, exactly. I mean, the only things that happen for me are not quite as funny, but it's just I've got lots of pedals for Hamilton. I've got this big old pedal board, and there's 2 different octavers on that, and for different sounds and stuff. And there's one song later on where I'm bringing it. It's a bit of a tap dance actually. I'm bringing in. There's a tremolo and a chorus at one point, and then there's a tremolo chorus and octave for another point. And sometimes you finish this big song, and then the next song doesn't need it. But if you forget to turn them off and you go into the next song, you've got all those effects on and that sort of thing. So it's just silly things like that go wrong, really.
One thing that I really wanted to ask you, actually, you've obviously done a lot of different shows over the years. You're on Hamilton at the moment. With those shows where you're doing kind of 8 shows a week for weeks, months, potentially years on end, how do you stay focused? What is your process for kind of keeping that fresh and staying on it every single time you go in?
Yeah, I mean, it's a good question because Hamilton's actually the longest I've ever been on a show. Like normally I do maybe 2 or 3 years and then move on to something else, but we'd sort of done about 2.5 years, and then there was the pandemic, and then we've gone back and done another sort of 2.5 years. So it's sort of like it's a long time on that, and it's the longest time I've had to sort of do that thing of, like you say, keep focused. And you hear stories of people who play shows for lots and lots of years, and when they finish, they can't really do anything else, and the career ends. So you do have to be careful to keep fresh. So I mean, not only do I do all this, this teaching and stuff these days, where you're kind of delving into songs and having to prepare them to show groups of people. That's helpful, but I'll make sure I get out to do a few other gigs. Like for example, next week I'm doing this thing called Queen Rock Symphonic, I think it's called. So we're going to Athens, and it's like a band playing Queen songs, 4 singers, and then an orchestra in the background. So it's quite a big thing. So suddenly I'll have my head in all the Queen stuff. So I'll spend a bit of time preparing that. do a few other gigs here and there. And then I just think one thing I do when I get to work as a warm up is I'll have a playlist of just tracks I really like to play along to, put it on shuffle and just play a song and just try and keep my hands working at other songs, because it's so hard to I think it's almost like you kind of think, oh, you're doing a show every night, your technique must be amazing, but it's only really amazing at playing those songs. And it's almost like you
Yeah.
feel like you go to play something else, it can feel like you've not been playing at all, which is very weird. So you get very, very
Yeah.
efficient at playing one set of songs, which can be really detrimental to your other stuff. So I literally just make sure I play a lot of other stuff. Play, like I say, maybe do a combination of playing songs you know well, so you can just roar through them, but also try and learn a new song. Like at the moment, especially for the classes, actually, I'm transcribing 1 or 2 songs a week, just to try and
Yeah.
get into the week, get into the real detail, of songs, and learn lines and get them under your hands properly. And I mean, at the same time, I also find I'm lucky with Hamilton because I'm doing a little bit of everything. So I've got the 5-string electric, I've got a 4-string hollow body. There's a bit of synth bass in it, about half a dozen synth bass tunes. I've got a little keyboard that pokes out from the music stand there, and then the double bass as well. And then you kind of do a little bit of everything. There's pizzicato and bowing on the double bass, and even with the electric stuff, sometimes playing with a plectrum. There's quite a lot of palm muting as well, which is I've not really done in another show before, actually. So that whole thing of getting the fleshy part of the hand back near the bridge and playing with the thumb to get this really subby sound. And I'll also do palm muted plectrum playing. It says
Yeah.
a little bit of everything in that show. So and I still kind of just enjoy playing the bass, and I'm still kind of, I would like to say I try and bring it every night, try and bring my enthusiasm for the instrument to the show still, and not just sort of call it in, because I think that's end of game, isn't it? Like it's end of things. If you just come in and you're bored and you're just going to get through it, because then people notice, I think, as
Yeah.
well. So luckily I
For
still enjoy
sure.
playing the instrument. I sort of quite like the tunes in the show, and I'm doing enough stuff elsewhere to keep it going. I think you have to sort of remind yourself how much you like the instrument and keep discovering new albums and stuff, and just keep the ears open, really, isn't it?
I think that's good advice for myself. As I said before we jumped on the call, I'm kind of in the whirlwind of babies and
Yeah,
kind of dad life at the moment, and
it's
it's really
hard.
nice when I do get to sit down and just play some bass and kind of
Yeah,
get back to that person that you were before dad
absolutely.
life began.
It's a
Yeah,
need
carry
in
on.
us, isn't it? Kind of this bass playing thing. And I often sort of try and remind. Sometimes you might be teaching someone and they're frustrated they can't play the next bit of vocabulary or something, and I kind of sort of try to remind people that I think the big win with bass playing in particular is that feeling you get when you're playing a bass line, and you've locked in with the drums, and it feels good. Often it's a repeated line, but that we get that feeling I'm being a bass player. So that's what the big win is. It's not necessarily the fastest lick in the world. That's something you can learn, and it happens or not. But the big win is actually
Mm.
being a bass player. So that comes from this feeling you get of playing sometimes the simplest thing, and it just sounds really great. And I think, like you say, when you don't do it, you kind of miss it, don't you? It's like something's missing in my
Yeah.
life. It's you've got to get back to it. Yeah. So
100%. Um, we've been talking about students and kind of learning a bit there. Do you teach outside of SBL when you're not on the show? And do you have
yeah.
any do you have any aspirations to kind of do more of that kind of stuff, or do a similar platform to Scott?
Yeah, I mean, it's funny. I mean, I've been doing one-to-ones for quite a while, more over Zoom
Mm,
than anything these days and stuff. And it's funny because, especially doing the courses for Scott, you start to think a bit more about your bass playing. For quite a while, I did a bit of teaching when I first left university. So I'd done uni in the '90s and did a bit of teaching straight afterwards. And I wasn't really engaged in it. I just wanted to get out and play. I would just sort of go through some generic books, and I wasn't into it really.
yeah.
But fast forward like 20 years and you've done a load of playing, and you start to be able to sort of dissect what you do and what you think about when you're playing music, and that's I'm quite enjoying that aspect of things now. So having done quite a lot of courses for Scott and some coaching at the moment, actually, it's funny you should mention it, because I'm putting together like a foundation bass course, which I'm just going to put out for free on YouTube, which has just got a few things that I keep coming back to with all different types of students, whether they're an absolute beginner or someone more intermediate or above. There's a few things that I think we need to sort out to get efficient on the instrument. So, sometimes you learn a major scale and it's just you learn it one way, and you don't realize there's two other ways we could finger that scale, and that would suddenly
Yeah.
unlock other areas of the neck. So I'm sort of putting together this really. I've thought about it a lot actually. It's a well thought through course, and it's full of a lot of really important fundamentals to do with what we do. And also I've got into play, creating these play along tracks. So I've made some really fun tracks that people will be able to download, and they get the booklet and all that stuff. So I'll be putting that. I mean, my YouTube channel at the moment is just called Ian King Bass, but I think I'm going to morph it into Kingy's bass lessons and make it
Nice.
that sort of thing. But I think it'll be a useful thing, and I think it's nice to have condensed it into a course. Like, what are the most important things at the beginning? Whether it be a bit of technique or just the way we play. Like I say, two main scales, major and natural minor. Triads and
Yeah.
arpeggios a little bit, and work them into music. Try and sort of learn a little bit, and then work on a song, and then learn a bit more information, and then work on a song. So try and keep it interesting. But I'm sort of excited about putting that out actually, because it's been a bit of a labour of love, just trying to prepare all the lessons and film them here at home and all that stuff. So it's yeah,
Brilliant.
should be good.
I'll really look out for that. I think one of the really lovely things about the world we live in today, and I mean Scott was kind of at the forefront of this,
Mm,
is that we're starting to see players like yourself release these courses, and we can get real insights into the guys and girls that are really working out there in the industry. It's not. I'm
right.
sure when you came up, it was kind of the same. You had, a Marcus Miller DVD and the Jacko DVD where he sits down and goes through things
Yeah.
with old Jerry Jamot.
Right.
But it's really, guys in studios, guys in the West End, guys on pop gigs, and you can really get a real insight into how they approach the instrument and their
Yeah.
thoughts on
That's it.
the whole business of it.
Absolutely. And I suppose one thing that's actually driven me to do the tracks, which I'm really chuffed to be able to do the tracks, is that I don't know if you've seen it, but years ago there was a drum instructional video of Jeff Porcaro, who arguably one of the grooviest drummers of all time, and he's got this. He put out this video. So he's talking through all these drum beats, but every so often he would go, "Let's hear what that sounds like with a band," and he'd have his brother on bass, and I forget the name of the keyboard player. They'd play a bit of a groove, and as soon as it was in context and with a band, it was just so great. It was so engaging. I was like, oh, "This is so cool," and makes you want to play the instrument.
Yeah.
So I think that's an important part of courses these days, is to try and drip feed a little bit of information and then quickly get it into a track so people can feel like they're doing something and playing music. So I've tried that with this course. Just at the minute you've learned a bit of what we call the rest stroke on the bass, how to pluck the strings nicely, we do a song that's kind of fairly straightforward on the bass, but the rest of the instruments, I've called in some favors with some absolutely ridiculous players. So the tracks sound hilarious, but you're playing quite simple bass to start with. So I think that can really
Yeah.
light that fire, and that's what happened for me back in the day. I would watch stuff. I'd watch like you say, like the Lewis Johnson Star Licks video. I remember that being just so
Yeah.
like, oh, this is too cool, And some of the Nathan East videos from back in the day, he'd be playing a really cool blues and stuff like that with his signature bass. It just got me excited about the
Yeah.
instrument. I think music does that more than the theory. I think sometimes you've got to be careful not to just hit people with theory too much so that they just go, oh, this is dull, I'm bored now, and move on. So if you can get them playing songs as quickly as possible, it sort of ignites the fire, the excitement for the instrument.
Yeah, particularly on bass, you need context, don't you? To
Yeah,
understand things like groove and note placement, all those kinds of things. It makes such a
absolutely.
difference if you've got a fun, well-produced track to play along with, and you can feel like you're in that band. Maybe this ties in then with what you were talking about with your course you're about to release. But finally, we tend to finish with, what advice would you give to your younger self? Knowing what you know now, how could you accelerate that guy's progression through the industry?
Yeah, it's a good question, really. I mean, I think the main bit of advice for, like you say, my younger self, or any younger person trying to come up, is to try and vary your listening, and vary what you play. Like, you may not be into a certain style or something, or a technique, but it's going to come round. I mean, I remember when I started, I think it was the Book of Mormon show a few years ago, there was a song that was plectrum, a rocky thing. And I hadn't really done much plectrum playing before, and I was sort of shying away from it. But the musical supervisor I remember coming back to the pit and looking in and going, can you give it a go with the plectrum again? You know, it's going to come around and bite you on the arse if you don't work on all this stuff. So try and listen to as much as possible. So at least you've got a good idea of what something sounds like if you get asked to play it, and try and play as much different stuff as possible and take on as many opportunities as possible. Because that's where you meet people, and that's also where you just get you experience. Sometimes I get it's a bit of a disappointment. I've had a few people. I think I was a drummer sitting in with the drummer on a show I was doing, a young guy, and he said, "I've been offered a panto for this winter, but I'm not going to do it. Obviously, I'm not going to do it. I'll get rid of that." And I thought, no, that's perfect. That's the perfect bit of experience for you. That's reading music. That's MDs. Yeah. That's meeting other people. It might only be a panto, but you might be sat next to the next guitarist that's going to play with Ed Sheeran or whatever. It might be a fantastic opportunity. And I think you've got to take these opportunities that you might not think you want to do, or they might not think are that beneficial, but there's so many different things that can come from that. And weirdly, in order to get like West End gigs, you have to have done a load of other stuff and have a nice broad range of things that you can do in order to come and play in shows. So if you haven't done that, sometimes people, you hear of people come straight out of music college and they want to go straight to a theatre pit, and it's like, I understand it's a regular gig, it's a regular job, but I think it's great to just try and get out and play lots of other stuff as much as possible, and my main thing, I suppose, that I wish I'd done more of is maybe just sort of working on things like soloing in a jazz instance, kind of being a bit more, getting on top of that, the harmony a bit quicker. So I've been I sort of started off working by ear, and I've sort of filled in the gaps as I've gone through my career, so I could have accelerated that, but I've sort of enjoyed the journey, to be honest. I think if you enjoy playing the bass and you get the basics right and you're a nice enough person to hang around with, then I think it'll go okay, sort of keep the ego in check, and it seems to go okay, So yeah.
Brilliant. I think that's really nice advice. That's got me fired up. I'm going to try and get some practice in tonight once the kids go to bed.
Cool.
And get ready for my show tomorrow.
Oh, brilliant.
So thank you very much, Ian. Could you let us know, where can we find you online if people want to contact you or see any of your stuff?
Okay. Well, I've got a little website, which is just iankingbass.com. And again, I'll probably keep that URL and add Kingy's Bass Lessons. So with time, you'll be able to find me either at Ian King Bass or Kingy's Bass Lessons. And I'm Ian King Bass on all my socials and YouTube as well. And again, but that will probably morph into Kingy's Bass Lessons before long, just to get the word out with that side of things. But yeah, that's it.
We'll keep an eye out. Kingy's Bass Lessons coming soon.
Nice one.
Thank you so much, mate. We'll speak to you soon.
Yeah, great to see you. Thanks for this.
Bye.
Yeah, see you soon.